Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's roundtable discussion, the endocannabinoid system and the warrior mindset. My name is Earl Lawrence, and I'm honored to guide this discussion with you all on behalf of Anziesha Consulting and our lovely sponsors. Um, Today, we're going to explore the health challenges facing veterans and high-performance populations. We're going to build out that discussion, and I'd like to get an intro from you all, my lovely guests.
For sure. So my name is Dorian Gutierrez. I run the Mind Aura Lab podcast, and I've connected with Steven on that podcast. So I'm happy to be here talking with y'all today.
My name is Dr. Bridget Cole Williams. I am a family physician, cannabis specialist with a series of books called Courage in Cannabis, and I do a fair amount of education across the country.
My name is Steve Philpott Jr. I am a Marine Corps veteran, co-founder of Anziesha Consulting. I have a lot of different ways that I help educate the public, contributing to sports cannabis and other different means, and I'm happy to be here having this conversation.
Thank you all. And I just really want to take the time out to recognize that they each bring a really unique perspective. And through your walks of life, I'd really like to highlight some of what we're going to talk about today. But to start with, Steve, as a USMC veteran, could you tell us a little bit about warrior mindset?
Yeah, I think when we were kind of sitting down talking about how we wanted to have this discussion and present it, we often talk about stress reduction, and we talk about that being one of the big reasons that cannabis helps so many people. But we never talk about the kind of mindset that isn't just in the military, isn't just in a doctor, but we have a mindset where we push as hard as we can, as long as we can. When I was a strength and conditioning coach, we actually told athletes and Marines the same thing. Push as hard as you can, as long as you can, until you can't go any longer. What I now know as a scientist, I'm like, by the time your body stops responding or is sending you signals that you should stop, you've likely already passed the point where you started doing damage. So for me personally, the warrior mindset is actually knowing when to rest, being intentional about recovery, not just saying, hey, performance is push, push, push as hard as you can. And then once you start seeing burnout, stop. So I think that there's cannabis adds an evolution to the warrior mindset from just pushing as hard as we can to know your body, your individual health that's different for each one of us up here, and take that into, hey, you can be a high performance person that pushes, very hard, military, doctor, but rest and recovery is paramount. It's important. So, yeah.
I think that's a really powerful thing you mentioned there as far as burnout and the warrior mindset. I think that sometimes people conflate it with just going as hard as possible all the time. And so I think that brings us to the next question. Dr. Bridget, could you expand on some of the challenges faced by high performance populations and kind of what can go into that mindset of overdoing it, if you will, or just pushing yourself to the limit?
Absolutely. So I think we're not just talking about the physical damage that can occur, but there's also the mental exhaustion and damage that can go along with this. And so along with whatever injuries might happen, whatever muscle damage that could occur, we're talking about people that develop more anxiety, they develop sleep issues, they develop imposter syndrome because they feel like they're not being able to compete or even live up to whether it's their standards or someone else's standards. And then you are not getting the best from your athlete or from your employee or what have you when you push them to that extent. And so I feel particularly in American culture, we have this idea of this warrior mindset. However, in the long run, we're actually not getting the best from the people that we want the best from.
It almost reminds me of kind of like during COVID when the nurses were traveling so much to the point that they were burnt out, but they were trying to contribute to society and everyone's well-being. Do you think that there are any other commonalities between kind of the high performance populations that are not always as glamorized or shined upon in terms of highlighting their accomplishments and maybe athletes or veterans who we always kind of try to keep on a pillar, deservedly so?
Absolutely. So I think when you're looking at, there's obviously certain jobs that you are actually encouraged and rewarded for pushing too far, right? I mean, I remember when I had my first child and I was told by some of the doctors, hey, I came back after 2 weeks and she had twins. And And I was like, why? And she was like, you should come back right away as well. And I was like, but why would I do that? Right? Because I'm actually trying to build my family and recover.
Yeah.
But that behavior was rewarded, right? And so we're actually getting tremendous healthcare burnout and poor decision making because we reward people pushing themselves beyond what their really their capacity. And not only does it affect that individual, but it affects the team, and it leads to lots of errors.
I appreciate so much of what you said that it's hard to pinpoint one thing. But one thing that stood out was what you mentioned about Western culture and kind of that being a moral system that we've kind of rewarded for some of the kind of toxic behavior.
Right.
I think that brings me to you, Dorian. As an Indigenous advocate, I think it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on some of this, and you tie in the endocannabinoid system if you want, but just the warrior mindset, and you have this unique perspective.
Yeah, so I'm actually quarter Native American. I come from an Omaha tribe back in Macy, Nebraska. So, Omaha in our native tongue actually translate to against the current. So you already see the ties that I can go back to from my roots, right? Seeing the poverty and the reservation, seeing the amount of stress and turmoil that my people go through, it already begs the question of why I feel like I have this pull to the resilience of maintaining my composure when times are tough, right? So when you're talking about the warrior mindset, you're talking about how you endure stress, how you endure pressure. What is your true character when you are trying to not unfold? You're trying not to unravel. And from my perspective, seeing my mother being raised on the reservation, seeing the plights of the alcoholism that runs rampant in my community, I turn the other way and persist on making sure that I'm a good role model, that I'm an advocate for making sure that future generations of the Native American populations are seeing someone that's rising above all of the shit that has been pushed upon us. So when I started becoming an advocate for cannabis at the age of 15, I didn't know how far I was going to travel down this pathway. My ambition was to go into medicine like yourself. So I was pre-med, but then as I started learning about the medical system and being a part of the clinical trials and whatnot, I started seeing that our healthcare system is definitely flawed, and also Native American population is not getting taken care of as well. So highlighting the fact that people need to focus on their own well-being and focus on developing an endocannabinoid system that is healthy, that we bring ourselves to a state of balance and homeostasis.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I love that answer, and I think that it shows it's kind of indicative of how we've deviated from some of the traditional perspectives that we had, and that focus on the group or the village raising individuals versus get it for yourself and focus on that. But
Absolutely.
I wanted to shift to focus on some of the endocannabinoid system and how that affects and can contribute to various aspects of burnout. But like Steve, I think you can outline for us how stress and other factors can be intricate in the endocannabinoid system, but also be mitigated by like your awareness there of yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when we're thinking about all the topics that we're talking about, the endocannabinoid system is kind of a new topic, right? But relief from cannabis is not. So there's stories of ancient Chinese kings that had epilepsy. They said they suffered from shakes. And they said that a priest or a medicine man would come and bring them something. These are stories that are thousands and thousands of years old. So I think fast forward to now we have names for, this plant contains THC and CBD. People who were consuming in the 60s didn't have a word for it. It was just like, do you have some? It's like, some what? Some is what I'm looking for. Now looking at the fact that we know that there's an endocannabinoid system, when you talk to athletes, when you talk to high performance populations and you can empower them with, hey, there's this system that actually helps you reduce stress. I think alcohol often gets comparable to cannabis. And the reason that I say it's difficult to use that is because alcohol is a neurotoxin. If you Google it, it is a neurotoxin without anybody's opinion.
Yep.
Cannabis is a neuroprotectant. At least since 1999, since the Department of Health and Human Performance filed a patent that says cannabinoids are antioxidants and neuroprotectants. So I think now that you start having this conversation, the endocannabinoid system becomes something that's much more general, because you don't have to consume cannabis to have an endocannabinoid system. You don't have to be a human. Your cat, your dog, bears, fruit flies, jellyfish. This becomes like life on Earth in the endocannabinoid system have evolved together for 600 million years. And I think that story is more powerful than even us just saying we get high. I think as people learn that there is a system and that system helps them with stress, we empower them with their own individualized health and performance, like Dorian said.
I appreciate that answer. It was very insightful. Dr. Williams, I wanted to hear how you think that the ECS is being leveraged and like the medical and therapeutic implications thereof.
I mean, I feel like we're really just at the beginning of this, right? Despite the fact that we do have this system, that we're really just putting words to it. We're really just learning about the compounds and molecules that will interact with it and with the receptors. And so the medical implications of just knowing about the endocannabinoid system is really going to be, one of the most phenomenal things that we're going to be studying over the next generation, right? Because we're really just at the beginning. And if we can get beyond the stigma of it and get some legalization to support it, we'll have the research that'll allow us to see what this is really all about. We're learning obviously about CBD and THC, but it's the minor cannabinoids that are really going to be, THC's been running the show for a while, but the backups are what was where the power is, right? And the combination of these cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids, this is where the power is. And so we're really just beginning and learning, and hopefully we don't go wayward. And I say that because I feel the best is yet to come, but the worst is also yet to come. And so if we aren't careful about how we approach what we're doing with our endocannabinoid system, if we don't maintain awareness that it's not just about cannabis, there's so many ways to activate our endocannabinoid system and put research and focus and education into that as well, I think we'll be better, more balanced human beings.
That was such a robust answer. I think you touched on so many aspects. It's like one of them that really made me think was the implications on the future of the market. And Dorian, I want to get to you and hear how you feel like the ECS affects flow states and kind of movement. But I just wanted to touch on what Dr. Bridget was saying, because the implications for the future of the market, and like you said, those strengths, weaknesses, but also the opportunities and the threats in terms of the worst that's yet to come. I almost want to build more out on that now in terms of the potential for, because the best, of course, is yet to come in that we are implementing this in the sports community. And that is one of the high performance populations that dictates what trickles down to other members of society. But I mean, if you have any more thoughts on what you think the future might implicate and kind of those potentials.
Well, I think what will happen is that, we're looking at incredibly smart people that sometimes make really bad decisions. And I say that because some of these synthetic cannabinoids that get you higher than what's already naturally in the plant, finding ways that can actually lead to more addiction accordingly, that's how we're going to go wayward, right? The problem is because we're just barely getting beyond the stigma itself, anything that happens in a negative light around any of these cannabinoids will pull down the entire cannabis community and industry. I mean, we're all going to feel this. We're going to deal with more legislation that will hurt everyone, patients, athletes, the industry itself. And so we need to take more responsibility, and particularly when we're talking about warrior mindset, when we're talking about athletes, people where their mind and body is so dependent on their success. We have to have education so that they can avoid some of these pitfalls now. And hopefully that if we can create more education, create more opportunities to discuss some of these things, maybe we can kind of help some of the people that may go wayward get a little bit closer on track.
I really appreciate that answer. And I think it kind of touches on what Steve mentioned as far as the endocannabinoid system and its age, regardless of what we did with cannabis or drugs, like that exists regardless. But I also wanted to hear from Dorian about flow state and movement and how you feel like that ties into the ECS. But
Yes,
also
certainly.
give us a little background on the dancing career, because I don't know if we touched on that enough.
For sure. Yeah. So I actually have been dancing and raving for the past 10 years. And the style of dance is called shuffling. It originates out of Melbourne, Australia. So the way that I got into it is funny, is because my younger brother was practicing this style of dance. Like, I always loved trance, house music, but I needed a stress relief. So I would do like 8 hours of my STEM courses all day. And then by the end of the day, I was just so burnt out on like learning all the scientific terms, principles, equations, that I was just like, how do I do something besides just working out? And so I always watched my brother take psychedelics, and he would practice in the garage for hours to electronic music. So I was like, I want to do that one day. Like, let's figure it out. So the first rave I went to was called Sensation White, and it was here in Las Vegas. It was at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, and that was the first time I actually tried a synthetic psychedelic. And when I lost myself in the music, I saw everyone dancing with this flooded white attire because that's all you could wear. And what really stood out to me is that no matter your perspective on dancing or what you would look like, everyone was enjoying themselves, and you could feel the rhythm just vibrating, and the energy in the room was palpable. So when I started connecting the dots of, oh, this is why my brother enjoys dancing and enjoying this movement, I told him, I'm like, all right, one day out of the week, 1 hour a day, like, I just want to be able to practice this movement and connect my internal system to be able to perform at this rhythm and this pace. So I started dancing, and I just got lost into the flow state of what me and Steven have spoken about in the past. So when I started doing this more often, I started getting injured. I didn't stretch as much. I wasn't paying attention to my system. So I was stressing my body out because I was obsessed with learning how to perfect this dance form. What I didn't realize is that there is no perfection. It's just simply practice, and it's just flowing and being with the music, releasing that stress. However, I started using cannabis to tap into that flow state, not only tapping into it, but also giving myself the relaxation of the muscles that I needed for the avoidance of injury. So, in a way, cannabis definitely saved my internal state from going into just like burnout because of all the courses, but it also helped with my creativity and unlocking more of what my mind was actually grasping for, and that was just a higher purpose. So with dancing, with the science like background, and then also involving cannabis in that picture, it gave me more tools to use in everyday life, because I started paying attention to the patterns of the way people moved, started paying attention to people's like perspective on the plant, and I started educating people more when I would go to raves and say, hey, I'm in the cannabis industry, I'm a scientist doing extraction arts. The oils that I'm giving you right now are from the plants that I sourced myself locally from farmers. So being able to tie all of this together in dance, music, and science has been ultimately my passion and my mission to educate the masses.
Very good. Very good. Just being in that meditative state. I think we're starting to understand people need to balance more. There's a lot of talk and words and what have you, but when you're in a high stress even academic environment. And if you're not resetting, and
Yep.
this was a reset for you once
Yep.
a week, and being in that deep meditative state, this is where the burnout goes, because we just keep pushing. You know, the problem with the warrior mindset is not reserving it for that one serious time. It's what people expect from intense careers and athletes every time.
Yes.
Right? And so when you're in that type of situation, where is your reset? And then you found through this, you know, almost like trance type dance, along with using cannabis to heal your body and mind, an opportunity to probably last a little bit longer, right? Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about some of the challenges and the role of the ECS, but I want to explore some solutions, like what you were just saying, in terms of kind of capturing that focus, but not allowing it to deter you from your warrior mindset, in that you're constantly doing STEM and this high level work. And for those who don't know, do you want to tell us what STEM means?
Yeah, so I mean, STEM field is like science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, like whichever field you're going to go in for a degree. And normally, like, when you get into one of those programs, and you can definitely attest to this, you're not really, you don't know what you don't know until you start getting into all of the weeds of all the scientific principles that you start tapping into. And you start to take a step back and you're just like, wow, there's so much knowledge out there. There's so many teachers, and I just want to absorb as much as I can. But you get funneled and narrowed into a path where you're going to be a specialist. And for me, I'm more of a jack of all trades. I like to be a generalist. I want to be able to touch on this, I want to touch on that, and be able to get lost in the sauce of just knowing the knowledge, and also learning from different mentors all across the boards, right? So being a student first and never a master has been my approach.
I think that's a beautiful approach, in terms of we could fill a library with the things we don't know, right? And some people get caught up on their one specialty, their field,
Absolutely.
and it like can put blinders on in terms of the plethora of things that could enrich what you know.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Steve, I wanted to get some feedback from you in terms of, we started to address this kind of conversation around the ECS and what overtraining and stress can do, as far as the negative things and the impact of maybe not taking care of yourself. And so, as far as the warrior mindset, what do you think some healthier approaches, including like self-care, cannabis, wellness, kind of, what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, the common theme that we keep talking about is how hard can you push yourself? And do you know when your change oil or check engine light comes on? Or are you not even looking at I ask people, would you drive and never know when your oil needs to be changed, when your gas is low? And that's kind of how we push our bodies. So I think what was really funny to me is, while I was deployed, I met a lot of people on the other side of the planet that had different cultures that they were raised in. And every single culture had some type of ritualistic daily practice where they would stop everything they were doing. You could talk about everything from siesta to actually praying, 3 times a day. And I said, you realize that takes you out of whatever current stimulus you had, whatever cycle you were stuck on, whatever you were focused on, whether it be, I've been studying for finals. A lot of people study for finals to the point where they're not actually learning anything anymore. In America, the warrior mindset is, well, I did 50 hours of studying. How many did you do? You only did 10 hours of studying? Oh, okay. So that competitive kind of mental state, it becomes toxic. It's in corporate America. It's everywhere. So to answer your question, I think people realizing that, hey, you can only perform this good if you have rest and recovery. LeBron James is an anomaly to all of us. We're like, hey, this guy's in his 40s. He's dunking on 18-year-olds who are, quote unquote, in the peak shape of their life. But you also hear this common thing talked about, that LeBron spends $1 million a year on his body. LeBron started eliminating sugar. And then he's like, what is inflammation? Now you educated an athlete on inflammation. Now he's going to the store and going, I don't want to put stuff in my body that causes inflammation. Now he wants to do meditation. Now so it starts in this, it is a personalized, individualized, kind of health and wellness. And then a little bit of education on one topic, say the endocannabinoid system. You telling somebody that they don't have to consume cannabis, but they can meditate to help their endocannabinoid system. They can do yoga. They can go on hikes. They can exercise, like you said. Even just a healthy diet with a non-Western balance of omega-3s and omega-6s. These things all help your endocannabinoid system. So I think those are positives. Those are things we can look forward to. And I didn't say anything about cannabis in that conversation. So it just shows the supplementation that cannabis is a tool to this kind of broader conversation that we're having.
I mean, the conversation that you kind of steered it towards sustainable solutions in terms of wellness practices, but also the ECS and just where we are as humans. And I'd like to get Dr. Bridges' perspective on what you think communities can do to embrace that more, especially high performance, like veterans that can sometimes be kind of steered away from what we would consider self-care in favor of pursuing the Western iteration of this warrior mindset where you just push yourself and you get used by corporations or the military industry complex until you are of no more service.
Well, I think we're definitely a culture that's influenced by our leaders or by our celebrities or what have you. And if we see them taking those steps, instead of focusing on the cars that they're buying or the last award that they won, but if we can put more focus into how they are maintaining this ability, how we need to be more present in the moment, because we're a culture that's always looking for the next thing, the next step, planning ahead, but we're not very focused on being present in the moment, right? And so I think if we educate and have more opportunities for people to see, stop, reset, rethink, restart, so that we will be able to push ahead, because that's when you see a shift, right? And we do have the most unhealthy healthcare system. It is a toxic system. But if we can start interweaving self-care, which is an overused term entirely, right? But if we can put more of that into our leaders and the people that we look to, then I think we can start making a shift. And like you said earlier, the word cannabis is a very small part of it. Right? Our systems can be healed and balanced in a lot of ways. Cannabis is one of those ways. But we have to have a shift in how our culture performs.
I think what you said and what Steve mentioned as far as like LeBron James and people seeing what he does, but him being an anomaly, it does open the conversation of looking beyond what they have done as far as popular things go, like cars and awards. But Dorian, I think that you can shed some light on this in terms of getting back to roots, but also embracing kind of indigenous practices, but breaking from the norm as like what we've molded for what the goal is for Western culture. How do you think that athletes, entertainers, high performance population can embrace that?
Yeah, I think, going based off of what Dr. Bridget and Stephen said, we need to shift our way of thinking to slow down and to reset for sure. I think with the many distractions that are given to us in first world countries, we are flooded with options. Like when you go into a grocery store, you're inundated with options that are all along different aisles. You're constantly being flooded with, could you do this today? Yeah, you could. And then another ad will pop up and say, oh no, distract you from your current mission. So I think with being intentional with where you're headed towards in a day is grounding in itself, right? You're trying to remain balanced with everything that you need to accomplish in a day. But I think with slowing down, you start to internalize a lot of the different things that people expect from you. So you need to slow down, reset, and also rethink, how am I showing up today and providing value to others? that's what keeps me grounded, is I'm constantly focusing on my mission as soon as I wake up. How am I going to show up today? How I'm going to be reserved in moments of distress where I feel like I'm going to buckle under the pressure of someone else's expectations, your work expectations, or even some from your family, right? Where you start to realize that a lot of it is just noise. And once you start cutting through that noise and start narrowing your focus on things that matter to you, your performance starts to increase tenfold. You start to develop more patience for being in uncomfortable situations because you're starting to place yourself in those uncomfortable situations where you're allowing your voice to tell you the things that you don't want to hear, but you're practicing the ability to decipher that the imposter syndrome within you is going to always be a part of you. However, your conscious self is the one that dictates the flow of the day, of your reactions, and how you respond to the environment.
Yeah.
I can really appreciate what you said about slowing down and taking your time in those moments, because I do think that even in the midst of like MJ Biz, we've all just been running around constantly.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that you all have demands on your time. Like, we got brilliant people up on this board. And what can you say about not just taking time, but being intentional with the time you take? Anybody can answer this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on not just taking a moment, because a lot of the somatic healing practices, they do dictate, could you just stop and be intentional about breathe? Just
Right.
take a moment to think about what's bothering you or like what is good. And so anything you guys want to add about like breaking away from normal culture, but also taking some time beyond for yourself and being intentional about what you can do with that time?
You know, it's funny because I've probably built a reputation of going 100 miles per hour and doing way too much, right?
Well, I saw your panel yesterday. It was amazing. But
It's an issue. But I have really gotten to a point where I'm creating more boundaries. And in the beginning, I would just say, no, I can't do that meeting, or no, let's start a little bit later, or whatever it may be. I'm a little bit more clear about it, where I will say to someone, no, I'm not going to do an 8 o'clock meeting at night because we're breaking into me taking care of myself or my family. You know, and part of the reason I would say it is because I realize the person on the other end of that phone call is also willing to do an 8 o'clock meeting. I want them to know, take care of yourself.
Love yourself.
Right? And I used to just say, no, I can't do it. Now I'm a little bit more clear because I realize it's that accountability. It's being that leader that says, this is not necessarily a healthy thing to just keep going 24 hours a day, right? And so it allows me to be more accountable. It allows me to be more thoughtful about it. And now when I'm dealing with my team, they know that I say that I'm pulling back. I'm not pulling back. I am being more accountable and caring for myself and my family better.
absolutely.
Right? And so being more vocal and intentional creates accountability. You know, if you're only just doing it in your head, you can get dragged back under in the current very easily. But if people start realizing what you're trying to do, then they will also respect that, and maybe they'll pick up on some of those ideas as well.
Yeah. I second what you just said. I think the Marine Corps was the first time in my life where I actually paid attention to every single thing that I did, every detail, because that's actually what they do. The beginning of boot camp, they actually try to remove as much of your identity as possible and let you just see who you are. And that, for a lot of people, is, in America, we say, I'm a goal-oriented person. They're not saying they're an identity-oriented person. So if you are always focused on the goal, it's easy to get to burnout, because you can just say, even when you know you need a rest, but the goal.
Yes.
Every time you know you're getting feedback from your body, you're like, I'm gonna push my body harder. I'll put caffeine in you until you just keep going. And what we don't realize is we have a natural balance that we didn't create. And we should try to live within that balance. But one of the issues is when you're pushing as hard as you can and you're goal-oriented, What Dorian said is your identity requires rest. Who you are as an individual requires recovery. It's not an option. So I think that is one of those things that should make recovery and rest cool. The highest performance population should get to a point where they say, this is a boundary for me. I've now hit some. I recently got that in the cannabis industry when I realized that so many people in the cannabis industry come from corporations, they come from medicine, they come from academia, they come from research, and these are places where the margin for error is little to nothing.
Yep.
So guess what? I don't care about your rest and recovery. Get the goal done. We're goal oriented. And the person ends up burning out their personal identity because they don't reach rest and it's not even on their list of things that's important.
Yeah.
I think that you all have highlighted a bigger conversation in that, Dr. Bridget, you mentioned the Western healthcare system being amongst the worst globally. Part of this narrative of being Western society, capitalist driven, it kind of necessitates your constant driving and pushing and trying to achieve, because like you said, you have the family, and I think creating that corporate culture of a trickle down of like, I'm not taking this late night meeting, not because I can't do it, I can. But the time I'm spending being a mother is more important because that's what I'm working, like, not trying to guess what you're working for, just in my mind, I would be working to be a better father. And if I didn't have to work, I could just be an awesome father. But healthcare being what it is, you need to be able to take care of the what ifs and the potential emergency situations. And so one of the things that can help alleviate being overworked and underpaid is education. And I think that brings me to my next point of Anziesha Consulting has been working on an ACEs course that can try to help the youth and next generations embrace not just the endocannabinoid system, but health, wellness, and some semblance of not turning their back on the Western values, because there are some great things that have been accomplished as a result of them, but having wellness be part of that driver, the same way you say you put caffeine into your body and you just keep pushing it, we should be putting wellness into our, like, and any form of that, like from dancing to, taking those 8 o'clock meetings and have them be at a time more conducive to everyone spending time with their family. So Steve, if you could give us some more insight into like ACEs and how you think that'll tie into not just endocannabinoid education, but the benefits for the intended demographic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I kind of get straight to the point. Being a Marine and a college strength and conditioning coach actually allowed me to compare the things that I saw in military service members about the same age as people who are in college playing sports. I would say people in the military and NCAA athletes are among some of the most fit individuals, some of the highest performance individuals in our country. To say that those two groups, healthy young people, are among some of the highest populations that suffer from mental health, PTSD, stress, and depression, I mean, if there wasn't a more direct reason for us to then explore this, again, I said nothing about cannabis, right? This course is meant to change the narrative from cannabis is a plant that contains one type of the cannabinoid class, which is plant cannabinoids. But this ECS that we're talking about is the reason that plant cannabinoids work, because we make our own natural cannabinoids that love nature. They're molecularly similar and do similar things. So I think with the NCAA removing cannabinoids from their banned substance list, UFC, NFL, NBA saying that they no longer drug test, it's a signal towards not just the change of the NBA players wanting to do that, not just the NCAA wanting the science, but it is a small cog in the bigger wheel or machine of Western education that typically doesn't come from what we need, but what's popular. So now that it's popular, those of us up here can now bring this education and make that part of the popular conversation. So that's the goal of ACES, is to bring these subject matter experts, researchers together, people with experience, and push this narrative forward, because there's an accountability and a responsibility for these pro sports leagues who do push their athletes as hard as they go. And this offers, just a small tool, again, to add to that belt. So that's the purpose and goal of ACES.
So Dr. Bridget, Dorian, you've both mentioned like high level education initiatives. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how education could help break down some of the walls, the stigmas, the barriers to entry for people who have that as something that's holding them back, and maybe how that could help this endocannabinoid system and wellness conversation advance.
Well, whether it's athletes or just high performance careers, cannabis can help with pain. It can help with inflammation. It can help with the recovery that your body needs, but also can help with the mental stress that people experience, the insomnia and the anxiety, right? And so if we're able to eliminate maybe less opioid use, that clearly a lot of athletes sometimes get into a bad relationship with it. And for many, the first sign is poor academic performance. And so we can't afford to have these athletes go to college and then the assumption is, oh, they're not interested in their education. It may be because they now have an opioid issue that is pulling them away from their education. And so by focusing on education and ACEs and allowing these athletes to help their body in a more holistic and well-rounded way, right? Where you can use cannabis in a way that can actually help with a multitude of things with less harm. But if we don't do education, if we don't do harm reduction, there are too many pitfalls out there that can lead to cannabis not being the positive tool that it actually is. So I think this is an incredible opportunity. I think we'll see a healthier athletic groups and associations and organizations. And anything that we can do to pull away from opioids, we'll be doing those athletes definitely a better service.
Yeah, and then just to start to close things out, I think the way to start educating people about the endocannabinoid system and cannabinoids in general is just to make science cool again. Like, why did we all of a sudden dismiss science? You know, during the pandemic, complete dropping of the ball for people to actually get involved and start researching themselves, right? We took for granted the amount of information that was out there prior to something like this happening. But being able to, as I said earlier, be a role model for the community that you're building, that you're trying to be a part of, where you start exemplifying, hey, I do X and I use cannabis, right? There is still a lot of room for professionals to grow within this space that bring other things to the table. Like, all of us here bring something new to the table, and yet we're highly outspoken, we're very educated, but we're humble in the fact that we don't know everything. And that's what's beautiful.
You know, I think that's a great place for us to leave it. But if you all have anything else that you're doing this year, I'd love to give you an opportunity to shameless plug real quick.
So, Anziesha Consultant, obviously, please follow us on all social media platforms. The ACES course, this is kind of like the mic drop that we're doing here. So the ACES course will be launching public in 2025. We're not just looking at the NCAA. All major sports leagues that are now involved in this type of, I guess we're going away from prohibition, and athletes have one of the most ridiculed profiles for consuming cannabis. So this is a really intentional campaign, and anyone who's involved in athletics, we know that it expands to military veterans, healthcare workers. So it's a bigger conversation, and please follow us on all social media platforms, Anziesha Consultant, and I appreciate this panel.
Share what ACES stands for.
ACES, so thank you. So ACES, ACES, so it is athletes, cannabinoids, and the endocannabinoid system. We intentionally chose those words in response to the NCAA's call to remove cannabinoids from their banned substance list. So this is all very intentional. I don't want people to think we're just making up a course. The NCAA has asked for assistance to meet them, and we've garnered subject matter experts to move that, that notch one step further down, and hopefully this is something that we can make a positive impact in 2025.
Absolutely. So new things that I'm looking forward to, number one is ACES. So I'm excited to be involved in this and to help educate and help athletes in colleges make better decisions. I've taken on some new roles with Johns Hopkins as far as looking at their cannabis education, rewriting a little bit of what they have and teaching some courses with them. And I need to have fun too, but I like to work too much too.
Warrior mindset.
But I am guilty as charged. But I work to create more balance. But I have a mobile infused mocktail bar, and we make amazing, over the top, ridiculous mocktails that we infuse individually for every person, including not just cannabinoids, but we have adaptogens and nootropics, and we make healthy mocktails. And it's a way to educate one person at a time.
Amazing.
Oh, and that's the Blossom Bar. So,
You want to plug the website? Tell us about the where can we get
blossombarmocktails.com, and on social media, it's Blossom Bar Mocktails, one word, on Instagram.
And we just need you to bring some samples for the next panel, but
Yes.
we appreciate you, Dorian.
And so follow me on Instagram, Mindora, and the Mindora Lab. I'm growing my podcast and my brand actively in Las Vegas. I'm focused on training for my half marathon in February, and then I'll also be doing the High Rocks competition that's out in Miami. So I'm practicing what I preach, and I want to combine my activities with cannabis. So whichever way I can get the word out there, thanks for helping me get that out there.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you all for taking the time today.